In life, there are often multiple ways to get to the same goal. Different paths that lead to the same destination, or variations on a recipe that give you the same dish. Now, often those choices are simple, like a comfortable armchair over a wooden bench, or a cup of coffee over a cup of Bovril. But sometimes those choices are bewildering. They leave us floundering, unsure which way to turn next. What if you're presented with 4 different armchairs, just with slightly different fabric? Or 4 cups of coffee, just with a slightly different roast? Not so easy then, is it? And that is what we're faced with today.
Really? I thought we were here to ride bikes. I've just lugged all 4 of these into the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, don't worry, Alex, we are. What we have here are 4 bikes that represent a choice that many of us face. Which frame material should you choose? Now, we've got 4 bikes here from the same manufacturer, Ribble, based on their same do-it-all platform, the CGR. The principal difference between them is in the frame material. We've got titanium, we've got aluminium, we've got steel, and we've got carbon. What are their relative attributes and strengths? Is one better than another? Ribble got in touch with us to see if we wanted to travel up and pay them a visit, ride some of their bikes on their local roads. We said, yes, please. Now, as a brand, they've been around for a long time, actually. They've been based up here in the north of England, building bike frames since 1897. Yes, 1897. Now, a lot has changed since then. I mean, gravel bikes have been invented for a start, but they are still going from strength to strength. And in fact, we're just going to visit them at their new concept store, which is open in a pretty little town called Clitheroe, surrounded by some awesome riding.
Oh, we made it.
Yeah, check this out, guys.
Dropping it.
Ribble is one of a few brands that offers a choice of components on your bike, as well as custom colour and paint options. And in addition to that, they offer a choice of frame materials. And I can't really think of another brand that offers this much choice. This is available on their endurance road bikes, as well as their cross gravel road platform, the CGR. And this gives us the perfect opportunity to explore the differences that different frame materials actually makes.
So who's riding which bike then?
Easy. Carbon. I'm going for that. Lighter, stiffer, more aero. Although that titanium one does look incredible. In fact, that steel one as well. It's very smart, isn't it? Steel is real.
Yeah.
But have you seen the price of this aluminium one? Absolute bargain.
I thought that might be up your street, but do you mind? I'm a big fan of aluminium bikes. Do you mind if I take that one? I know it's the most affordable.
Are we going up any steep climbs today?
Yeah, we are actually, yeah.
Carbon.
Yeah.
Shotgun carbon. How about the carbon?
All right. I've actually never ridden a titanium bike, so I'm going to go from that.
Welcome to it.
Okay.
There's only 3 of us, and there's 4 bikes here.
Got a plan.
Oh.
Anybody want to go for a bike ride?
Bloody hell, guys. You know who that is?
No.
Yeah.
That's Jamie Burrows. Like back in the day when no British cyclist really won anything, Jamie bucked the trend. Like he was under 23 World Cup champion, ended up on US Post.
What? He was Lance Armstrong's teammate?
Yeah, Lance Armstrong's teammate. Poor guy.
Morning, guys.
Jamie.
Ready for a bike ride?
Yes, please. Show us the way.
Will do.
So before we take a closer look at the tech specs of these bikes, which one's the most popular?
The sales statistics have aluminium the most popular, 56% of sales. Titanium and steel both the same at 13 and then 18% for carbon.
So that's quite interesting actually, because that shows that aluminium is the most popular, which could be down to the cost, maybe a bit cheaper than the others. But the other three materials are all fairly comparable. So we already know that the geometry is the same across all of the different material frames. But when you sort of engineer and design these frames, are you trying to make them feel the same, or are you playing to the strengths of each sort of material's properties?
Yeah, obviously you've got to play to the strength of each material's properties. I mean, it's pretty much just giving the customer a choice of frame material without sacrificing comfort and feel on the bike.
Yeah, so you can kind of advise them on the strengths of different properties and the materials, and then they've got that free choice.
That's right, and pretty much down to what kind of riding as well. I mean, when we launched the CGR category, obviously, as it says, as the initial stand for cross gravel road, you know, we've had it for 3 years now, and initially gravel wasn't really a big thing in the UK. And the initial sales were pretty much for, I'd say, seen across commuting and winter bikes.
Yeah.
So alloy was obviously the logical choice. Good clearance, takes 45mm tyres, fit your mudguards in there. And I think as gravel's come on, we've seen the other materials come on as well.
Now, whilst we're doing a bit of faffing around, I thought I'd talk you through this, my CGR AL. As we've just heard from Jamie, it's the most popular frame material in this bike, and for good reason. But it wasn't always this way with aluminium. When it was first introduced to bikes in the 70s and the 80s, it was very flexible and it had a tendency to snap. Not that that stopped Sean Kelly from winning a bunch of races on it, but it wasn't until we'd worked out how to weld it and the benefits of vastly oversizing the tubing that it then started to gain popularity. But it still had a bad rap. Legend has it was that it was so harsh to ride and transmitted so much buzz that it would take hours after you'd got home for you to regain feeling in your hands and also your backside. But not anymore, not by a long shot. Construction techniques of aluminium have moved into another dimension. Now, part of the reason those early bikes were so harsh was because the shape of the tubes were just that, they were tubes, and so their stiffness properties were constant in every direction. If you wanted a bike that was stiff to pedal, it was also going to be stiff vertically as well. But thanks to heavy investment in aluminium technology, principally in Asia, we've got all sorts of different construction techniques. One of the big ones is hydroforming, which is where the tubes can be manipulated into all sorts of different shapes. So like the down tube here is clearly D-shaped, so you can have stiffness properties that vary in different dimensions. Now, add in an advanced knowledge of butting, which is where the thickness of the tubes varies along their length, meaning that parts of this bike could be less than 1 millimeter thick, whilst others considerably more so. Now, what this means is that the material, which is naturally very soft, is able to keep this key character trait even when it's made into a bike, but yet still giving you a bike that's stiff, both in terms of pedaling and also steering.
If aluminium is the material of the people, then titanium is very much the opposite. A material that oozes luxury, is rare, is corrosion resistant, is ultra strong, and it requires an immense level of skill and expertise to work with. When compared to aluminium, titanium is approximately 60% more dense, yet roughly twice as strong. It has a particularly high yield strength, and there's just no substitute for titanium when it comes to applications that require high stress, but also are required to be lightweight. Just 0.63% of the Earth's crust is made up from titanium. Any more than that, it doesn't occur naturally, and it has to be sort of mined and processed from other materials, and as such, adds further to the sourcing and production costs of titanium. And as well as being particularly tricky to work with, it has to be welded in an oxygen-free environment. Forming it into tube shapes is also particularly tricky and costly, and it just takes a considerable amount of time to craft a frame such as this. What is it with us humans and our desire and lust to have such rare, exotic and shiny materials?
I've just borrowed Jamie's bike for a second to tell you about it. It's steel, which is real. A phrase you're as likely to have heard from a grizzled old road rider as a trendy young hipster. And for good reason, because steel is about as traditional as it gets for bike materials. As we heard earlier on, Ribble have been making bikes out of it since 1897. But it doesn't mean that it stood still in its development. Now, as you probably know, steel is made almost entirely out of iron, which, unlike titanium, is very abundant and it's also easy to mine. So the cost of the raw material to the end user is significantly reduced. Plus, it's also easier to work with. I mean, this can be butted and bent and brazed and welded to its heart's content and still come back for more. This bike, which is the CGR 725, is made out of Reynolds 725. That's right, which is a tube set that's triple butted and heat treated. The heat treatment makes the steel particularly strong, and the butting means that the tube thicknesses can vary, so you can get really thin tubes in areas of low stress, which really draws out the kind of the ride quality that you get from steel, that sort of that zing that it's famous for. This tube set can also be TIG welded as well, and you have to look pretty close to see the welds on here because they are super neat. Now, steel might be denser than titanium, but it is as strong. Although I suspect that a lot of people that are buying steel bikes do so for more than just the performance characteristics. Of all the frame materials, this one has more of a reputation and a tradition than any of the others. So it speaks of adventure and resilience and robustness and reliability. A bike that can handle anything you throw at it, except for perhaps salt water. But of course, while steel might rust, when it's painted and it's treated inside, that's not anything you need to worry about.
This is the Ribble CGR SL Carbon. It's got an absolutely mega spec. We've got Zip 303, SRAM Force ETAP 1x group set on there, and the frame set weighs just a kilo. Now, carbon, right? I mean, I probably don't need to tell you much about carbon. It's all the bike industry's been going on about for the last 20 years, but that's for good reason. I mean, it's an incredibly lightweight material. It's very strong. It's very stiff. In fact, it's, well, 6 times less dense than steel typically, and typically, you know, half the density of aluminium. But it's not all just about being lightweight. Carbon can be tunable and moldable, and that allows us to create shapes that you just can't create with steel, titanium, or aluminium, such as this aerodynamic down tube or this really, really cool aerodynamic profile we've got on the handlebar. But also by refining and tuning the carbon layup and the orientation of the fibres, you can introduce compliance and comfort into a frame in a way that you just can't with the other materials. That then combined with special shaping allows features such as the seat stays on this bike to add increased comfort. And it's for these reasons that carbon fibre bikes have become the choice, the only choice of pro bike riders and any performance-orientated cyclists. Despite this, carbon frames do have their critics, with some people claiming they lack soul, feeling, or heart, that they're just cheap, moulded and plasticky. Well, this is just pure ignorance. It's a total myth. The number of hours that goes into producing a carbon frame and the skilled labour is immense. They all require lots of individual, precise pieces of carbon fibre to be intricately cut out and then painstakingly laid up in a very precise layup, which is then placed into very expensive moulds. And then after that, the frames are hand finished. In all, the number of human hands-on hours required to make a frame like this is far, far higher than that of any of the other materials we have here today.
Now, this isn't a competition today, or at least not any more than usual, but it'd be wrong, given that we've got the opportunity, not to put these bikes head to head. And we're going to start with one of the big ones, weight. Definitely not the be-all and end-all when it comes to buying a bike, but it's important to a lot of us. Actually, right now, it's really important to us four, because we are dragging ourselves up the trough of Bowland.
If we ignore the fork, the group set, and the component options that are on these bikes, of which there are a plethora of options, we're left with just the bare frame. And this is by far the lightest. The SL carbon frame comes in at just over 1 kilo. And when you're riding up a steep gradient like this, that lower weight really is noticeable, especially when you attack and dance away from your mates up the climb.
450 grams behind carbon is titanium, using the most popular titanium alloy.
3AL 2.5 vanadium. This frame comes in at a rather svelte 1600 grams. Not as light as its carbon brother, but considering its material properties and its intended use of off-road as well as on, that's impressive. Only 80 grams behind titanium though is our aluminium frame, with a frame weight of just 1,680 grams. Bringing up the rear is the Stoic steel. The heaviest of this bunch, this 725 Reynolds frame comes in at 2,300 grams. That's twice the weight of the CGR carbon, and sure, it takes a bit more oomph to get going, but once you're up to speed, it's just going to keep on rolling. Plus, is speed necessarily the most important thing? Not if you're going to load this up with bike packing bags galore.
Say, right here, Jamie.
Yep, that's right.
You're right there, mate.
I've got this. Oh yeah.
You pull it.
I've never seen a gate like that before.
Are we going again? What are you doing?
Ollie, no!
Sorry.
You can't throw rocks.
Just thought, I just wanted to demonstrate the robustness and strength and durability of Alex's titanium frame. I mean, it'd definitely be able to take it, wouldn't it?
I don't know about that, but I definitely don't think you should try throwing rocks at bikes. Certainly not whilst Jamie's here.
That would be an interesting test, although rather wasteful. And there have been lots of myths in the bike industry about what materials are or what materials aren't particularly strong. But the reality of it is the robustness of a frame is down to a number of different things. You might hear phrases such as tensile strength, megapascals, weaves, or even yield strength. But let's put this myth to bed, because all of these materials are robust. They quite simply wouldn't make it into production otherwise. That's it. End of.
Where they differ is how they are engineered and how this affects their material properties and how they respond to different stresses. In the case of steel, titanium and aluminium alloy bikes, they're engineered and formed into a single consistent material, whereas carbon bikes are made from, well, strands of stiff carbon fibres that are then in a composite material with a flexible resin.
What this means is that metal frames will dent and bend when put under undue stress, whereas carbon frames simply won't. And one of the classic weak points of metal frames are the areas that are under constant stress, such as where the down tube meets the bottom bracket, for example. And it's a potential area to highlight that fatigue after many hundreds of thousands of kilometres.
Carbon fibre doesn't suffer from the same fatigue issues that alloys do, meaning that, well, in theory, it has a longer shelf life. It can be more susceptible to big, heavy impacts, though, especially when you're dealing with super lightweight carbon frames. But bear in mind, it is repairable.
The most important thing about robustness is weight and engineering. Super light road bikes, for example, have less material and are far more susceptible to knocks and bangs, although they are perfectly strong enough in their intended direction. And it's the reason why do-it-all bikes such as this are a little bit heavier than standard road bikes, because they're designed to withstand all sorts of different punishments. Take the CGR 725, for example. That's tough as old boots. Right guys, this is where me and my bike are gonna excel. Onto the rough stuff. Wow.
Tyres, maybe, mate.
Oh yeah, mostly the tyres.
I mean, when you think about like the tensile strength of steel versus that of titanium, I mean, it's kind of no wonder.
I'm sorry, guys, but nice riding with you, but I've got to go now.
Oh, you got to go?
Yeah, family duty beckons.
Okay, mate. Well, thank you so much for showing us your roads and your bikes as well.
It's been good, thanks. Yeah.
Good riding.
Yes.
See you next time, guys.
All right, mate. Hope you
Cheers.
make it back in time.
Thank you.
See ya.
Anyway, when you consider the X-ray crystallographic structure of titanium, the cubic lattice that it can actually form, that's, you know, incredibly wide.
Okay guys, we're not far from base now. We haven't talked about ride quality yet. That is one of the big ones. It's also impossible to quantify, so this is all on feel. Can I get started? My observation on this one, right? The most significant thing on this bike in terms of comfort is the carbon seat post, okay? And the alloy rails on the saddle. You can visibly see it flexing. And it makes a huge difference. So even though the frame is alloy, the fact that the fork is carbon and the seat post is carbon gives it a lot of comfort. And I thought that was really interesting, you know, that the frame was less important than I perhaps thought it would be.
Well, aficionados will tell you that titanium has a certain zing to it.
Did you feel it?
I can't say that I've felt it so far. I think that's partly down to the fact I've got the same carbon seat post as you, which has got obviously a lot of compliance built into it.
Same carbon fork as well.
I've got the same carbon fork as well, and it's also partly down to these 47mm wide, quite chunky tyres I've got on here. So I think that's taking partly that away. But what I can say is that out of the saddle climbing, I can feel the stiffness in the bottom bracket area, which is quite nice because it feels quite good on the climbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, having ridden over the years like every single type of frame material in various bikes, I'm just a massive fan of carbon. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, the fact that you can tune carbon, you can tune the layup and how you orientate the fibres to build in compliance, but also you can have any tube shape you like within reason, and that can also massively improve the comfort and the ride quality as well. So the seat post, great example on this bike. It's different from the round seat post you have on your bikes. We've got a D-shaped cross section. This would be really hard to engineer into an alloy frame, but you can do it with carbon, and these D-shaped cross sections, they do offer, you know, greater compliance. And the other features, such as the seat stays as well, you know, they can be engineered, and this bike's a great example of it, in a way that can give you much more comfort. And all around, carbon bikes just feel really plush. They're really nice at absorbing that road buzz.
They do, and to be fair, I borrowed your bike briefly, and it did feel very responsive. Admittedly, it's got a different build to this one. You've got the Zip 303S wheels on there, which are very nice, but it did feel like you can feel that reduced weight, I think, and you can feel that stiffness in the bottom bracket that does make it just that little bit more responsive.
Whenever you accelerate on, like, especially on like a steep climb, it's perceptible, isn't it? You can feel a difference with a nice light carbon machine.
Yeah. Now Jamie was right. We are rabbiting on a lot here, but he's not here to talk about his steel bike. Talking about weight, now of course that was the heavier one, and whilst it might have a bit of a penalty going uphill, actually as soon as it's going faster, particularly when it's rougher, that extra weight actually is really good, right? That extra inertia helps you maintain that speed. And interestingly, I was chatting to someone at the concept store earlier, one of the members of staff who owned that CGR 725, and he was saying that he bought it because it was slightly less stiff than the carbon frame. He wanted a little bit more movement, a bit more life in that frame. And that is really important.
Comfort as such, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, but also, like, you know, compliance, like laterally, you know, he wanted that extra life. And having an overly stiff bike isn't necessarily the be all and end all. Certainly not, in fact.
That's a good point.
It's getting dark, isn't it? We really have gone on. Should we start heading back to base?
Yeah. Yeah, come on.
Cycle across.
Oh, I'm going to ride on the gravel.
I can't clip in.
Can we do it?
I've been riding for 27 years. No, what? Here he goes. Oh!
You put my hip out. You nearly had it. There's the money shot.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
That was a good ride. I'll come up again to ride my push bike for sure. Now, we've ridden our bikes a lot today. There is one inescapable truth that we haven't touched on yet. Cost. My aluminium bike, without doubt the winner here. Most affordable bike. £600 for the frame and fork. And that's the same fork that you guys have been riding on your more expensive bikes as well.
Next comes the steel. at 800 quid.
That's a steal.
Oh, that is a steal. Yeah. And then after that, you got, well, carbon at 1300. And then actually top of the tree is the titanium at 1800. But the relative cost of the different frames is, well, it's because of the cost of the raw materials, but also the manufacturing process associated with those materials. So although carbon as a raw material is relatively cheap, the cost of manufacturing it, laying it up, producing those expensive molds, that is a very costly process.
Yeah. Now, all of these bikes, clearly they're as capable as each other. We've all gone on the same ride. We've all got big grins on our faces. But whilst there's no winner here, which one, easy Tiger, which one would you choose?
I'm going to stick with what I've been riding all day. I'm going to go with the titanium.
Really?
I know, like, it's the most expensive one, but there's something about it. When you pick it up, it's got a sort of, just the feel of it is something special, and just knowing that you've got an item of luxury that is a bit rarer. Yeah, that does it for me.
Yeah, fair enough, Ollie.
Well, titanium, I agree, it has a nice tactile feel to it.
Yeah.
And if I was racing and, you know, obsessed with performance, like maybe doing gravel racing or whatever, then yeah, the carbon, definitely, without a doubt. But for just all-round use, having fun on a bike, adventures, exploring, an all-rounder, I'd like the titanium too.
It's interesting, isn't it? Well, I wonder whether that's partly because it's new, because we're blessed with riding carbon bikes day to day. For me, if money was no object, I'd go for the carbon bike, 100%, pure performance, lightweight, stiffness, compliance, yeah. But if I had budget constraints, I'd definitely go with the aluminium one and then spec up the components. So rather than getting a carbon frame and then getting more affordable components, I'd get an aluminium frame and then get more expensive components.
You basically want Ollie's wheels on it, don't you?
I basically want deep section carbon wheels so it looks super cool, and every time I get out of the garage I'm like, yes, I am riding that. And that is really important at the end of the day, isn't it? You've got to love the look of your bike.
Yeah, I want my wheels on your bike as well.
Yeah.
Could have a little play around later, couldn't we?
Should we switch them all round? Let us know in the comment section down below which frame material you choose and why.
Yeah, and big thanks to Ribble today for hosting us and letting us ride these amazing bikes.
Yeah. Right. Food, I think.
Yeah, come on.
Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. That way, is it?
Yeah, this way.